Okay, let's get going. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm really glad. Chaz, questions go here. Good choice.
Mhm.
I am really glad that you're here today. It's honestly the title, if it caught your eye. I know a lot of people in this environment, the investment markets are, unpredictable. They always are. But this presentation isn't full of charts or tax tables. It's really about a conversation I hear quite a bit during planning meetings when I have people around, 50s and 60s. Uh, Worried about good markets, bad markets is not unusual. So, for those of you who know us, we are LynnLeigh and Company. I'm Kelly Olczak. I'm the managing partner of LynnLeigh. We're very proud to be a 100% woman-owned registered investment advisor based in the Bushnell's Basin. And we work with a carefully selected group of families right here in our community. We're fiduciaries. Our responsibilities are straightforward. We put our clients' best interest first, always. I've been a certified financial planner since 2009, which sounds weird, but can't believe it's been that long. What I love the most is helping people with financial complexity and help take that financial complexity and make it easy to understand so that you can be confident in your financial plan and your investments. Joining us today, we have Chaz Miller. She's our chief operations manager. Okay. She's going to be our Vanna White. She's going to monitor the chat and keep things moving behind the scenes. So for those of you who are joining us today, a number of you are really good at raising your hand. Please encourage questions. Also joining us is my partner, Becky Gillette. She's our Chief Compliance Officer. Very few firms our size actually have a dedicated Chief Compliance Officer. We're pretty proud of that. One thing that is worth knowing about us, we work with fewer than 100 families, and we keep it that way on purpose. What that allows us to do is give each family the time and the attention they need for their individual issues. So I'm not going to kill you with a million polls. There are three. And if you could take a minute and just help us answer this first one, it makes us understand who is worried about things or not worried about things, especially through this conversation. Okay, so let's dig in. So this presentation really started because I was sitting with a client and he leaned back in his chair and, he was worried after 30 or 40 years of working, he's savings, he'd done everything right. Complicated part is actually starting to take money. But when the markets are very bumpy, it's also like, oh gosh, I've done all this saving. Now what? The individual pieces weren't surprising. We've got Social Security, IRAs, investments, maybe a pension. And what we found was people don't, taking income from your savings is unnatural. And then when the markets are bumpy, that makes it a little bit harder. But in this case, with this person, earlier in their financial life, if something went sideways, maybe we had a bad market, '07 to '09, a job change, an unexpected expense. Yeah, it was uncomfortable, but also recoverable. But when you get close to retirement or you're in retirement, that buffer feels very different. There's less runway, and the question that comes up, they're not abstract anymore, they're real. Um, the first thing I hear is, are we going to be okay? My favorite one is, what do you think the market's going to do? Oh, I know exactly what the market's going to do. I have no idea what the market's going to do. Nobody does. What happens if you one, what, sorry, what happens if one of you gets sick? What happens when markets get really bad and you're watching the news all the time and you're not overreacting, you're reacting like a thoughtful person at a genuinely consequential stage of your life. The answer isn't careless. Okay, that's what we're trying to accomplish. We're going to give you some actionable things that you can do if you are concerned. Okay, so like I said, you've spent, 30 or 40 years contributing to your IRAs, your 401ks, and the goal has always been make this thing grow. Then it becomes, oh my gosh, let's protect it. Don't touch it. How do you actually take money out and not feel worried about it? So before we walk through retirement income strategies or investment decisions, I want to just start with a concept that I have that kind of helps people understand money. So there's three kinds of money that I believe. There's now money, there's later money, there's never money. And now money is the kind of money that you need in the next maybe year to 3 years. Okay. Your bills, everyday spending, your emergency funds, and it needs to be stable, reliable, and accessible. And it lives in your checking account, in your savings account, even in money market. And depending on where you think you are in the market cycle, whether we're having a good market or a bad market, we like to see 3 to 6, maybe even 12 months of now money so that if something does happen, it's reliable and it's there. Then you move to later money. And this is your retirement accounts. So you've got savings in a 401k, a 403b, maybe some Roth accounts, a brokerage account, long-term investment accounts. Here at LynnLeigh, we call them TOD accounts, transfer on death, but these are brokerage accounts. And these types of dollars can afford to take more risk because we've set aside the now money, and the later money can handle market fluctuation. In fact, market fluctuation, I love a bad market. When the market's bad, it means it's a great time to buy. Then you have this thing called never money, and this could be your legacy to your grandchildren, your children, maybe a cause that you really care about. It could be fun money, like you always wanted to go on this trip or that trip. But that never money can take a lot more risk because it's never money. So these dollars are funded in long-term investment accounts. They can also be in your IRA because you may not spend all of your IRA. Some people like to see this kind of money in types of trusts, and I'm not an attorney, but there are ways that you can put money away for your loved ones or for a charitable cause in trusts. So here's poll number 2. And what I'm seeing is pretty typical, and it's not a reflection of how smart or prepared you are. Most people have never been asked to think about their savings as a paycheck. That's why it gets kind of awkward. The income planning piece is a different conversation entirely. Okay. So here's how I think about building a retirement paycheck. And it starts with one number. How much do you need every month? What's your target? My favorite word, budget. From here, we have money or income that is reliable, like Social Security. Maybe you have a pension. Maybe you have an annuity that gives you a monthly distribution. Obviously, the timing of when you claim Social Security alone can mean tens of thousands of dollars over the course of a long retirement. But once we have those guaranteed sources of income, what's left is the gap. And that's where people I see get very anxious. They know their Social Security payment's going to come, the first week or the second week of the month. But how are you going to rely, or how much do you have to rely on your savings? And that gap is filled through the later money, your IRAs, your 401ks, your 403bs, maybe a Roth brokerage account. So when we start talking about these kind of topics, I like to bring in scenarios that are real in our practice. So we're going to talk about a couple. Their name are Becca and Brian. And this literally just happened. We're almost in June. So this conversation, new client started in April. So when I met with them, they had done almost everything right. They'd saved consistently for decades. They were not big spenders. They were not careless. They were exactly the kind of people who should feel confident heading into retirement. But something changed with Becca. After living through some really scary market swings over the years, she just got to a point where she couldn't watch the news anymore. And the headlines were too much. And every market drop made her worse. So, what I tell people, if they can't turn the news off, turn the volume down. You don't have to hear every single thing they're saying. Okay. So, gradually, what Becca had been doing is she did not have an advisor. And what she was doing is slowly moving her account, her 401k, into what she thought was very safe. Okay. Super conservative investments, low volatility. That meant less to worry about when she turned the TV on. So when I looked at her investment layout, the way it was allocated, her expected return was 4.38%. So if inflation is 2.57 and her IRA money or 401k money is earning 4.38% and you haven't paid taxes on those dollars, that could be a problem. Now, it could have been a lot worse. She could have gone to cash. Don't do that. That's really bad. Now, Brian's portfolio was more balanced, and his expected return was about 5.5%. So here's what they were trying. Here's why they came to us. They wanted to retire. So Brian actually did retire in May. I spoke to him yesterday and asked him what he was doing, and he had just caught 8 trout, so he's enjoying his retirement. Becca's younger, and she wants to retire. She wanted to retire in 2 years. When Brian retired at 62, they would have health insurance through Becca's employer. No gap, no scramble. Becca would keep working, and that part made a lot of sense. But even under this plan, she wanted to retire at 62. But even if she stayed employed, the additional premiums for his portion added about $12,000 a year to their budget. And that number, unfortunately, you guys, does not stay flat. We model in financial plans healthcare growing at about 6%, which is awful, but that's the way it is. And it acts, and healthcare inflation acts very differently than gas or groceries, although lately it doesn't feel like that. But if we're looking long term, we like to assume that 6% growth. Okay. And this was just their starting plan, but they figured they had a clean plan, they had savings. Brian has two pensions, which helped a lot. And they felt, healthcare's check done. They had a 2-year runway before Becca thought she would retire. Okay. So here's what she thought she wanted to do, and this is what we modeled. If she retired at 62, that means that she needed health care now, which you can get through the Affordable Care Act, the marketplace. So both she and Brian were going to have to get coverage, Brian only for a year, but that got very it put more pressure on their savings. So Becca wouldn't reach Medicare until she was 65. And so, like I said, she could do one of two things. Either her employer might have maybe a COBRA plan for her, or like I mentioned earlier, the Affordable Care Act. The costs really were complicated because her portfolio was super conservative. Okay, so this is a report. All financial planning really is a cash flow, money in, money out. So this is a real life scenario with Rebecca retiring at 62. You'll see at the top, on the right-hand side, there's the solve, but up above you see 6.5 with MOOP. I don't like jargon, but MOOP stands for maximum out of pocket. That's for healthcare. Okay. So the left-hand side of this table is Becca retiring at 62, They need health care. Her savings are way too conservative. And I have to tell you, she wanted to feel safer about her investments. So because she made it less aggressive, and her intention was to reduce risk on the surface, and it felt to her like the right thing to do. It was one thing she could control. But the biggest problem is there is no such thing as safe at all. There's no safe investment. So this scenario created a different kind of risk, and it was the risk called purchase power. Over the years, this is why this failed. So what you're looking at is their savings went up for a little while and then it dropped down because of the pressure of the expenses for healthcare, even in retirement, and a very conservative portfolio. And if your portfolio doesn't keep pace with inflation, it erodes, which is what we see here. Don't worry, there's a happy ending, okay? So, what did we do with this? Before I show you the happy ending, this is what her investments looked like, okay? So, her investments were super conservative and it goes underwater here, right? She's out of money. So, this is a story of making just a little change. So, this is her expected return of 4.38%. And then this is how we solved it. So by adding a little bit more risk, and what an expected return is, we obviously, I wish I could see the future. We can't. I used to say I don't have a crystal ball, but then Becky got me a crystal ball for Christmas, and the thing doesn't work. Okay. Thanks, Beck. By just changing the expected return from super conservative 4.38 to 5.5, just a little over 5.5. Not only does it work, she can retire at 65. She might be able to retire at 62, but that's a little bit too aggressive for us. So I recommended wait until 65 because then they both are on health care, Medicare, and that risk of needing out-of-pocket expenses for the Affordable Care Act are gone. So two things we changed: her investment strategy and waiting a little bit. And I still think 5.53% expected return is too conservative, but we'll do baby steps. So it was still within her comfort level, not aggressive. It was balanced. And there you go. So but just by making this small change, it worked. And it works well. So you'll see on this chart, they're ending up with just under $2 million. And so that doesn't mean that how do I explain this? We're making sure that if anything unexpected comes up, we can take it. We can pay for it. And that's what the right-hand side shows. Okay. So let's just pull this all together. So what we learned was Becca's fear of market volatility had led her to a portfolio that was too conservative to sustain a 30-year retirement. When we started this discussion, Brian's retirement was 1 month away. They had no plan yet for healthcare costs that they could follow. They didn't realize that the added premiums from Becca's employer were very expensive. And we did learn that Becca should not retire at 62. That would not work. And once again, the quote safe plan was actually created a more fragile environment. So we changed the investment structure. So Becca's still at work. So I helped her figure out how to rebalance her portfolio to get closer to a growthier portfolio. We pushed her retirement out to 65 with both of them on health care. We still modeled that 6% of annual growth on healthcare inflation, which is horrible, but that's what we have to do. And what it meant. So not only did we help them with longer term investments. And it wasn't a small adjustment, it rippled, and it allows them to have a lot more fun, a lot more fishing trips. The bigger lesson was that if you know what your now money, later money, and never money need to be, you don't need to worry about, are you going to be okay? You worry about, do I have my now money organized? And Becca was not wrong in being scared. Listen, guys, I do this for a living. I've been doing it over 20 years. And sometimes I don't like my portfolio and how it behaves. And I own pretty much the same stuff our clients own. I just might have more stock than bonds because I'm younger. So she wasn't wrong in being scared. What she needed was a strategy. And literally, she didn't say, gee, I wish I did this sooner. She said, I didn't even know this was sort of available to me. So we talked again about people saying, I want something safe, which I chuckle about. But what people don't understand is that safer investments create bigger problems. So, like I mentioned earlier, uh, we design portfolios for volatility, and we don't know what's going to happen in the news, but we know where we are in the market cycle, meaning did we just come out of a bad market and now the market's going up? Or are we in the middle of a market that's sort of doing well and no big peaks or valleys? Or are we on a decline? And that is normal. We will always have good markets. We will always have bad markets. And when we manage money for people, we know this now money, later money, never money. And even if, like, I had a client who he's still working, he's got great savings, but he's worried he's going to get laid off. And so in his 401k, we carved out some now money, even though it's still in his IRA, right? So we moved about 15% into a money market, kept everything else invested. That's okay too. And I'm also not saying that everybody needs to take more risk. In this situation, she needed to take a little bit more risk. And this is also Becky's favorite statement. LynnLeigh and Company does not provide tax advice, but these investment allocation decisions are deeply connected with your entire plan. And we do coordinate with your tax professional when it's important. Okay, last poll. Thank you for being honest with that. What I'm seeing is pretty typical of people who show up conversations like this one. I mean that as a genuine compliment. This is conversation that's kind of started earlier this year. I sent out a bunch of emails to clients for surveys, and these are everything we've covered this year has been on topic with feedback from what we got in those surveys. And worry about money is something that I can't tell you not to worry about money, but I can help you organize your thoughts in ways that might help you. Okay. So what are you going to do with this? Not every headline requires a response. And I want to leave you with that. Having a plan doesn't mean you stop paying attention. It means you stop reacting to everything as if it threatens everything. When you know where your now money is and it's stable and easy to get to and the market drops, it doesn't feel like an emergency because we have defined what your now money is. And when you know your later money has time to recover, a bad quarter doesn't feel like a crisis because you're not spending it tomorrow. On average, a bad market lasts 18 months. Okay. And so that's why at the beginning of this presentation, I said now money could be anywhere between 6 and even 18 months of your must have money. And that way, if the market does do something silly, we would use the now money. And I have clients that say, well, I've got cash and it's not doing anything. Well, that's okay because that's now money and it's not supposed to be doing anything. It's supposed to be boring and reliable. Okay. When you know your now money has the longest runway of all, the daily financial commentary becomes largely irrelevant to your decisions. And we do a lot of really good hand holding, okay? And that's really what Becca needed. Not less information. She just needed a structure. You're allowed to have a plan. You're allowed to still watch the news. You're allowed to have worries about scary headlines. And with these plans, you'll know where your money is. That's not indifference. That's confidence in the plan and how it actually feels. Okay. So there is a difference between a review and a plan. So all three of you who are with us have had reviews and plans with us, but I have learned, and this is something that Becca and Brian brought to me. Um, Normally, they would get an annual meeting with their advisor, and someone would pull up a chart, walk through portfolio performance, and then they get sent home with statements and have no idea what they just covered and how it relates to what their must-haves are. Those meetings are fine, but they don't answer questions that are actually keeping people up at night. Are you going to be okay? Am I actually ready to retire? How am I going to replace a paycheck? I have meetings with our clients where we don't even talk about performance. They get their performance reports, they get their fees reports, so they know what they're paying us. But we really lean in with plans first. What do we know different from the last meeting? And how does it apply to what's, going on in your life? So here are 5 actionable things you can do to help you sleep better at night. So map your bucket. Just sort your money into these 3 categories, right? Understand where your retirement paycheck is coming from. So obviously, we talked a little bit about Social Security and maybe a pension. What's your gap? And if you can't answer those questions quickly, then we should get together. And that's where the conversation will start. Audit your fix the worry moves, right? If you've shifted your accounts to very conservative investments, mainly to feel safer, ask how that choice actually affects your retirement timeline. Becca thought she was on track. She thought she was doing the right thing, so the money was there when she retired, and it was. But when we rolled out the real story, it was different. Tell your advisor what you actually need. Less noise, more clarity. I really work hard to try and define jargon like MOOP um, because I want you guys to always leave appointments knowing a little bit more, understanding a little bit more about investments. If you've ever been asked, my favorite thing is if you had a magic wand, what would retirement look like? That's exactly where we start. And I've got some handouts after you fill out the survey, which I would be grateful for you to do. I'm going to share 3 handouts that are intentional. So there's one about volatility. So when the market drops and scary headlines arrive, most people panic or react or do nothing, as I mentioned before. This gives you a third option. It's a structured checklist of questions worth actually asking when markets get rough. Things like whether your emergency fund is sized correctly, whether there are tax opportunities in a downturn, when it makes sense to rebalance versus sit still. If you're working with me, we rebalance frequently throughout the year, but some people don't have an advisor yet. The next one is all about cash flow. This is sort of the now money handout. Like, what is my now money? So before you build that retirement paycheck, we need to know where your money actually goes today. Not a strict budget, but a clear picture. This guide will kind of ask you questions and kind of help you sit down to look at your cash flow so that we could then go and fill that retirement gap. And the last thing is investment review checklist. So this is a handout for anyone who answered our first poll question, honestly. If you've been meaning to look at how your accounts are invested, and if you'd like me to explain them and see Jane run. This is where you're at. This is why you're invested in these sorts of things, how your investments are allocated. I think fees are really important. I know that our clients get at least once a year a explanation of what we get paid and how we get paid. Um, so it will really help you match your risk level to your actual timeline. And let's get together. If you feel like we need to dig in deeper on some topics, we're all ears. I think the most important thing to know about LynnLeigh is that we intentionally built this practice to help less than 100 families. And we do that because this planning stuff takes a lot of time, takes a lot of time to organize, takes a lot of time to make sure we're on track. And there are firms that have hundreds of families. I don't know how they help everybody, but it does allow us to spend really great time knowing who you are and what you want to be when you grow up. Do you guys have any questions at all? Well, I've got Becky's other favorite slide. It's disclosure time. So we don't practice law, we don't do taxes, but if you've got questions about these sorts of things, we have really great resources to help you get answers. And I would love to know if there are topics that we haven't covered yet that we will cover or can cover. I know that next month we're going to be talking about a client of ours who almost got hacked. And so we'll be talking about cybersecurity and things to keep your eyes open for to keep yourself safe. But we would love more topics. If there's something we need to cover, please let us know. That was painless. No questions?
No, no questions.
Okay.
But if you think of some later, just shoot me or Kelly an email and we can set up a phone call or a Zoom or an appointment and cover those.
Yeah. So after this, there's a survey and then you get your handouts. This is recorded, so I'm going to send out the replay and feel free to share it with friends. We'd love that. And let us know how we did. Enjoy your day, guys. Thank you.